everyone, welcome back to my channel. So since it's July and we're already halfway through the year, I figured it'd be fun to just kind of make a tier list and put every book I've read in there. Also, I keep seeing it on the 52 books subreddit and I was like, oh, I want to make one and put it there. And then I figured it'd be fun to like film my thought process as I was doing it. So I've read 59 books, which is a lot more than I thought I would because I just got back into reading this year. That's not to say I haven't been reading, but I was reading web novels, like Chinese translated web novels and like fan fiction and manhwas and webtoons. I wasn't really reading published books. So I had originally set a goal for myself this year for, I think it was either 12 or 25 books, and I blew past that by, I want to say like March or April. And now I'm at 59. I'm thinking I'm going to set my goal to 80. 100 would be nice, but I kind of need to lock in with my schoolwork and like make sure I graduate. So 100 might be lofty. I'm thinking 80. But regardless, I'm just going to take you guys through my tiers and like what each level, I guess, means. And then we're going to go through and I'll just kind of like briefly explain like why I'm putting which book where. Okay, so let's just start with the first book I read this year. That would be Strange Pictures by Aketsu. I really liked this book. I think it had the perfect kind of atmosphere and the whole concept of like, I believe 5 pictures or maybe 4 being interconnected to one specific story and at least one, like murder was super interesting. And it had like the right balance of like mystery, thriller. I wouldn't call it a horror personally, but I could see why it would be labeled that way. But I really liked it. I would totally recommend it to anyone who says they like a good kind of mystery crime thriller. And I want to get my own copy. I liked it so much that I ended up buying his third book, or their third book, I don't know their gender, Strange Buildings. Next, let's see. So many books. Oh, okay. Where is The Outsider? I'll do that one next because I've read the second book. This is The Outsider by Stephen King. For this one, I'm kind of torn between it was fine and I liked it but probably wouldn't reread it. I think I liked it. It was pretty entertaining. I think it took a little too long to build up to like the whole supernatural aspect of the story. But once we got there, the story kept being interesting. I did the audiobook and there was this one part where they're talking and then something goes like, hello. And I was genuinely kind of creeped out. Like I had the goosebumps. So I think it was entertaining. And I have to say, like, Stephen King writes he's really good at storytelling. So I appreciated that whole aspect of it. That being said, the next book is If It Bleeds by Stephen King. And hang on, give me a second, guys. Sorry, I had to make sure the images were actually like portrait. Anyways, the next one would be If It Bleeds by Stephen King. This is the sequel to The Outsiders. There's like 2 other books after this as well. I did the audiobook for this as well. It's 4 short stories, and one of the short stories is called If It Bleeds, and it's the sequel, like the direct sequel to The Outsiders. Funnily enough, that was one of my least favorites in this. My least favorite was this other one. I liked 2 of the short stories, was okay with If It Bleeds, and then I didn't care for, what's it called, like Life of Chuck at all. So for me, it was fine. I would never revisit this book, honestly. Vampironica, this is an Archie comic. It's kind of a book, it's more of a comic, but it still counts. I really liked it. I think it was, I liked it. I probably wouldn't reread it, but I thought it was like a really cute thing, or it was a really entertaining book to just flip through to see like Veronica Lodge, if she became a vampire and what that kind of looks like, and taking these characters I like from the Archie comics I grew up reading and just kind of putting something supernatural in it. I liked that aspect. That being said, I read the follow-up book, Vampironica New Blood. Although I say follow-up, it's not even a sequel. It's like a similar story, but kind of adjacent. I just didn't care for it. I didn't like all the characters they tried to introduce. I don't really like when too many new characters get introduced to a world I've just kind of grown used to. So for me, this just wasn't for me at all. Let's see. Okay, The Ones Who Walk Away from Amelis by Ursula K. Le Guin. I read this because someone said that I should read this if I liked this other book I read called Sublimation. It's on here. And I really liked it. It was only 5 pages. I don't know why I counted it, but I don't care because I could read it on my Kobo, so it counts. I liked the whole story of it. It's very speculative. I believe Ursula K. Le Guin is a speculative fiction author. And just based off this, I do want to read some of her other stuff because the questions it poses and the things it makes you think about were super interesting. And it gave me so much to kind of like ponder And then when I read her afterward, where she mentioned another thought that someone had about, like, who's in the closet in a Melis, I was like, oh. So I like that. I like stories that make me think a lot. So I would recommend it. Even though it's like 5 pages, actually, because it's 5 pages, I would totally recommend it because it's super easy to read. And you'll get through it pretty fast, in my opinion. I hope. Okay, let's see. Next, we have the only book I've read so far that's been Booker nominated. This is On Earth as It Is Beneath. I saw a review that called this, what is it called? I Who Have Never Known Men But Make It Spaghetti Western. And I do understand what they mean. It's definitely kind of like a Western story. And I thought at times it was entertaining, but I don't know if I would ever want to reread it again. I think some of the messaging was just like slightly a bit heavy-handed. Although I will say, based on the 2 books I've read that have been mentioned by Booker or somewhere in the Booker list, heavy-handedness seems to be an ongoing theme. And with that in mind, let's talk about Small Boat. I would actually put Small Boat in not there. I think I liked Small Boat, but I probably wouldn't reread it for the same reason. I just found that in the end, particularly, it was very heavy-handed in what it was trying to say, and I was like, ugh. But I think the part leading up to it was interesting. This is not a likable character, but I don't think they're trying to be. But I would say, yeah, it's good. And if you want to read something by a Booker author, totally worth the read. It's mentioned all the time. It's not, I don't think it would be like Orbital. I haven't read Orbital, but I know a lot of people who read that one don't like it. I think this one's good, particularly if you like philosophy. Where on Earth as It Is Beneath, that one, it's not so much philosophy. If you like the concept of like people at their worst, what does that look like? And maybe questions about how we are all kind of complicit in the mistreatment of people in jail, among other questions that, I'm just not going to get into. I think that one is worth the read as well. But regardless, I wouldn't reread either of them just because I liked the story, I appreciated it, but I don't know if I enjoyed it enough to even purchase the book myself. I do own Small Boats, but I'm going to give it to a friend soon. Okay, next, let's do something that I ranked a little higher. Okay, Fabulous Bodies by Chuck Tingle. That comes out this month. I got the audiobook from NetGalley. This was the most fun novel I have read all year. Genuinely. Everything about it was so entertaining. There was this one part in the audiobook where I remember I didn't realize I was holding my breath, and then something happened, something good for the main character, and I was like, and I didn't realize I was so sucked into the story. But this was my first Chuck Tingle book, and it won't be my last because this was just so fun. I think I'm gonna do Lucky Day next, maybe. I don't know. But I will say, check the trigger warnings. A lot of gore in this story. Definitely some body horror. If you're not good with horror or any of that stuff, this probably isn't for you. Okay, let's see. Okay, Legends and Lattes. This is a graphic novel. This was also an arc. I liked this one. I liked it a lot. I would recommend it. I've never planned to read the original book, but when I read this one, I was like, yeah, that's great. It's exactly what I would want if someone recommended me a cozy fantasy. I'd want something like this. It was just the perfect mixture of food and a little bit of conflict, but the stakes were never too high. And it was just something that was really easy to just kind of get through. And I think the art was really nice as well. It suited, I don't know, nothing felt out of place. Okay, let's see. Next, probably, let's do this one. So, Death of the Author. This was my most recent read. I literally just finished it on the last day of June. I have never felt so mixed on a book in my life because I really didn't like this story. And then you get to the last chapter and it literally changes everything about this book. And I mean every single thing. Everything you just read has to be looked at in a new light. And suddenly I'm like, oh, wait. And then everything I disliked about the book, I have to think about the last chapter and I go, well, when you consider this, of course I didn't like it. And the thing is, I love that. I love the idea of that. And I love how speculative that is in nature. But that is not enough for me to forgive how miserable I was reading this book. So it's I ended up giving it 3 stars because it's this is so great. the question, or really just like the whole narrative that was posed by the end, was so interesting, so speculative, so intriguing, but I was still miserable. So I can't rate this any higher. And I'm really mixed on if I'd ever recommend this to somebody. So it was just a case of completely mixed feelings. Ooh, my leg fell asleep. Okay, sorry. My leg fell asleep. Okay. Next is The Marlowe Murder Club. What is it? By Robert Thurgood. So this one, I think I did the audiobook. I liked it. It was really funny sometimes. There's this one scene where they pull off like a heist or something, and it is like the funniest heist ever, you know, just like an old lady, a church mom or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And then like it's just really funny. And I was genuinely laughing while listening to the audiobook, but it did take a while for me to just kind of be interested in the book. And I do think that was because I was expecting a little something different, you know, from a cozy mystery. Because again, guys, I haven't really been keeping up with books for like the last 5 or 6 years, so I'm not really sure what a cozy mystery looked like. But once I kind of put aside my expectations and got into it, I really liked it. But I don't think I'd reread it. Like, I liked this book, but I would never reread it personally, just because, again, I still think it took too long in the beginning to really get to anything. Let's do Burn Down Master's House by Clay Kane. I really liked this book. So I'd put Burn Down Master's House here, liked it, would recommend, because I do think it's a really good book. I think it's something that people should read. It's really good to read about like the actual cases of resistance against slavery that happened while it was still a thing, I guess, while it was still enacted, while it was still legal. But the writing is a bit formulaic. You know, it's just kind of, it's hitting you over the head with like the brutality, and then suddenly there's this moment where you're like that Jill Scott meme where she's like, that's what I'm talking about. And I appreciate that. But, you know, I don't know how else to phrase that. Like, I like it and I would totally recommend it to people, but just know, like, I don't necessarily think this is like an amazingly written book so much as a book that has important material that people should be reading, you know? And it's based off true stories. Like, there are sources cited for most things in this book, or like most of the stories that they are based on. Okay, next let me just start going in order from the top. It's so much quicker this way. Okay, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. You probably can't read that, but still. This is the first classic I've read all year, and I loved almost everything about this book. If I had to name one thing I didn't like, I think the ending was very contrived, you know? I just read it and I was like, okay. Like, okay. Again, a little heavy-handed, and funnily enough, I do think the phrase heavy-handed is a critique that is used for this book by, like, you know, real critics, so I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. But yeah, once you get to the end, you kind of just go, okay, you're kind of slamming the point on my head a little bit. But I think everything else about it, like the journey to get there, the little life lessons it's trying to teach you, it's so interesting, and I loved it a lot. I do see what people mean when they say, like, oh, you don't need to read self-help, you can just read fiction, if they mean fiction like this, because I feel like this is a fictional work, a literary fiction classic that's trying to impart on you some, like, deeper lesson through the stories of others without trying to be, like, a self-help book. And I really liked it. And I like his writing. I have another book by him that I plan to read later. Okay, next is, what is that? A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck. I really liked this book. I would totally recommend it to everyone. I just don't know if I liked it or I loved it. I mean, I gave it 4.5, so, you know, you think it would be right here. But I will say, I think it really depends. Like, I won't unilaterally recommend this to everybody, because the thing I liked about it is kind of the underlying message of, you know, I don't know, I liked, there was this, the last 5 pages is where it really clicked for me and where I really loved this book, and just what it has to say about, like, what happens to connection when you're in a situation like this, or like what happens to you and your humanity. But if you're reading this book for, like, philosophy, I don't think you'll like this. One of my friends who's, like, really big on philosophy hated this book for that reason, and I was like, you see, I didn't really like the philosophy or anything about that, which is funny because I think it's written by a philosopher. Don't quote me on that. But I kind of liked the other messaging about, like, relationships and companionship and humanity and, you know, like, life and time. I liked that stuff. So I think I'd put it under liked it a lot, would recommend. Okay, The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I loved this book. Oh my gosh. I did the audiobook with Tom Hanks. I would totally read this book. I actually plan to buy a copy to read it myself. I just think the way she writes a story is so riveting, and the way she kind of quietly builds up to this message and then it just kind of like hits you all at once, because I didn't really enjoy part 2 until the end, where it's like Danny and Maeve, the main characters, they come to this realization. I'm like, yes, exactly. And then from there, the way the book followed was just so interesting, because it was giving you this kind of message where it's like, yes, we do like to focus on our own misery instead of moving on, but look how easy it is to be drawn back into that pattern again. And I enjoyed this so much, you know. I loved her writing style. I would say this was like a literary fiction, historical fiction. I do think the ending was a little too neat, but she said this is supposed to be like a fairy tale, so neat endings make sense. Either way, though, I loved the book. I really enjoyed how it was written. And I think if you say you like literary fiction and you like family drama as well, you will probably like this book. If you don't really like literary fiction, you won't, because the plot meanders. Like, I would not say that this book has a really deep plot per se. And it's really internal as well. Like, it's more of a character study than anything else, but I really liked it. Let's see. Automatic Noodle is immediately a not for me. I thought I would love this book, and I did like it. I liked parts of it. When the robots were actually cooking and making their noodles and running their shop, I loved it. But then out of nowhere, it got so heavy-handed about like immigration and so many, and like PTSD and war trauma, and I don't mind that. But I think if you're trying to propose to me that this is cozy sci-fi, it should stay cozy sci-fi, and those themes have to be approached within a specific way to stay cozy sci-fi, and I think this did not. I saw a review that said there's a Dr. Seuss book that is far more subtle than this. I forget which one it's called, like the Sneetches, where it's like stars upon stars, you know? And I agree with that. I think even that was more subtle than this. This, it's like suddenly I'm watching a robot's PTSD flashback, and I'm like, what's going on? I thought I was reading a cute story about robots running a noodle shop. Also, the solution in this story was nonsense, which is sometimes kind of true for cozy stories. Sometimes the solutions to conflicts are just so ridiculous. But this, I was already annoyed with the story, so this nonsensical solution aggravated me. I didn't enjoy the story, basically. I wouldn't recommend it. But, you know, make your own decisions. This one is the Mud Puddles Manual for Natural Magic, or of Natural Magic. This was an arc I got through NetGalley. For this one, it was fine. You know, I didn't like it. I didn't hate it. I think the romance aspect was a little... Is someone calling me? Okay, no. The romance aspect was done in a way that I feel was kind of instant love. There was no real justification to the romance. I was like, okay, what was the point of this? I think I would have enjoyed the story more without that plot. On top of that, it does this thing where it'll show you a scene and then it'll repeat that scene again and again and again, or like 2 more times, or even 1 more time from another character's perspective. It'll be the exact same scene from a different character's perspective. And I'm like, I don't want to read the same scene that many times. I don't even want to read the same scene twice, let alone like 3 times in the end. So it just started to irritate me near the end. So I don't even think I want to read the second book in this series, but I could see someone else wanting to, just not me. Let's see. What is this? Meet Me at the Convenience Store by the Sea. This is the second book, so I'm actually going to do the first book first. Let me find it. This is Convenience Store by the Sea by Sonoko Machida. I absolutely love this book. I think if you like slice of life, you will like this book, because it kind of perfectly encapsulates all of the good things about a slice of life anime, for instance. I think this is the kind of book that would be a perfect 12 series anime series about, you know, people who are basically going through some type of struggle or some type of issue in their life. Nothing too bad for the most part. Nothing has ever been like super angsty, but it's like, you know, light angst. And then as they're dealing with it, they somehow find their way to the tenderness convenience store with the really handsome manager, and they work through their problems. So it just kind of gives you chicken soup for the soul vibes. If you know that book series, it gives that same vibe where you're just kind of reading about other people experiencing the hardships of life and kind of learning that this is not the end of the world. You will survive. There are ways to move on from this. And I adored that. I love that kind of thing. So I really liked it. So then the second book is Meet Me at the Convenience Store by the Sea. I liked this one a lot. I would recommend it. For me, it's not I loved everything about this because I think, I don't know, too many of the stories were too high school centered. With the first book, I think only one was centered on girls in high school, and that's fine. I really liked the way the story was handled. With this one, we actually see a character that was featured or mentioned in a first story kind of be mentioned in the next one. And I don't know, I wasn't interested in reading it in the same way. I still liked it by the end, but I just feel as though I didn't like the stories in this as much. I felt maybe a little more like adults would have been appreciated, because I think maybe 2 of the 4 stories were girls in high school, and one was, they were adults, but it was almost based in college, and I was like, I've had enough. But I still really liked it, just to be clear. I enjoyed every single chapter, every single page, like everything about it. It's just, I don't know. It didn't hit the same way the first one did. Okay, next is A Pack for Spring. So this is a Why Choose Omegaverse MMFM story. It's a series. They have one for each season. I also have a pack for autumn and a pack for winter, and I've just ordered a pack for summer. It's on its way here. I don't think I went into this with really high expectations, but it's better written than I thought, I have to say. And I'm not saying that as an insult. Like, really and truly, when I say all of those like adjectives and tropes and letters, I'm not really expecting too much, because I find the stories that are too tropified are sometimes not the best written. But this, I liked it. I think it actually delved into issues I never would have expected a story like this to go through. You know, feelings of inadequacy, a feeling that, you know, everyone else is moving ahead of you. Maybe medical issues that make it harder for you to date. You know, this is like medical issues in the Omegaverse specifically. I will say there's a lot of smut. I think there's like 10 scenes in this 450 page book. So it's like very spicy. If I had to rate it out of 5, at least a 4.5. But I enjoyed it. I would definitely, I don't know if I'd reread it. I think that one read was cool, you know, but I also don't know what I'm going to do with my books now. Like, I cannot give those to other people, but I did like it. I can't even donate it to a library because the cover, let me show you. Look at the cover. You see how cute that is? Someone's going to pick this book thinking that it's so innocent. I did. I wasn't really paying attention when I picked this book. I was like, oh, how cute, a pack for spring, whatever that means. And then I read the synopsis and I went, what? Why choose MMFM Omegaverse? And then I went, it should be fine. I did not anticipate how much smut is in this book. It's almost erotica, but it's still interesting, so. Okay, so next is There's Only One Sin in Hollywood by Rashid Newson. So I read this because I've wanted to read it since I heard about it in February. And then it also completed a Goodreads challenge. I will say with this book, if you pick it up, please know that it's not a mystery. It's not a thriller. I don't know why it's tagged that way. There's like 5 pages that are like an actual mystery, but you can genuinely predict who did it and who killed Xavier very fast. Like, there's no real mystery. It's just like, let me find the information to prove that this is true. I would say this is more of a historical fiction about, you know, like, what is it? California's gay history in the 60s. And that's kind of more what's worth reading it for. Reading about like Xavier and just kind of how the history progressed. I liked it. I don't think I'd reread it. I wish I could have checked it out from the library, but I don't mind that. You know, I'm happy to support an author regardless. Next is Sublimation by Isabel J. Kim. This is a speculative fiction, kind of a sci-fi. I liked it so much that I ended up buying the book myself because I originally got it as an ARC through NetGalley, and then it was just so good that I wanted my own copy, so I got one. I got one through Aardvark, and then I saw the really pretty one from Barnes & Nobles and how it had like cover art and then like an a foil cover. You know, like on the, when you take off the cover, there's like a foil design. So I got that one, and I'm going to sell the Aardvark one or just give it away. It was so good. It was so interesting. I love the literary fiction aspect. I love the speculative aspect. If there's one thing I didn't really care for, it was the kind of thriller subplot that becomes a thing in the second half. I don't seem to care for thrillers as much as I thought, or it takes a lot for me to like a thriller. And for me, it just wasn't as good, but it didn't take away from how great the book was, and I would totally reread all of it again. So Although I will say this is not a book for people who don't like unlikable characters, because none of them are that likable. Next is The Very Definition of Love by Sophia Benet. This was good. For me, it's supposed to be a romance. I think it's going to be kind of a Bridgerton adjacent series, but it focuses on women, because when I looked it up one time, it said the Bancroft Sisters #1. I don't know if that's still there, but I think it's meant to be kind of like a Bridgerton series that goes through all of the family members finding love. The problem with this book was that I don't think it was that romantic despite being a romance. So it was just fine, you know? Like, this is one of those, yeah, it was just fine. Like, part of me thinks maybe I'd like it, but I wouldn't reread it. And I did like it, but it was mostly fine. Like, a lot of it was just like, okay. There were some moments that made me genuinely laugh, though. Next is The Decomposition Book by Sarah Van Oz. I have genuinely mixed feelings about this book. I think I can see why someone would like it. I think this is my first weird girl fiction book, or weird girl lit. It was very weird. You know, the premise is that the main character, she finds a corpse, and instead of reporting the bodies to the police, she reads her journal and pretty much trauma bonds with this dead girl. And I just remember thinking, okay, I'm like physically ill at the idea of doing that, but you know, this isn't meant to be like a super likable person. But it's just like everything about this book just gave me mixed feelings, and it was just so disturbing. If I could have only read Ava's story instead, you know, the girl who the main character finds, I have to remember her name, I'm sorry. I think it might be Savannah? Yeah, I think it's Savannah. If I could have only read Ava's story about like getting lost in the woods with 3 people and how they all eventually perish, I would have loved that, because it was so sad and resonant and haunting, and I adored that, but I did not like being in Savannah's point of view. I think, I can't say if it depicted OCD well, but what it did depict was very uncomfortable sometimes, okay? Next is Habits of the Sea by Shay Earnshaw. I got this as an ARC as well. I really liked this book. I didn't anticipate liking it as much as I did. When I first finished it, I gave it like a 3.5. And then like 10 days later, I was still really thinking about this book. And I realized that every single time it had rained since I finished the book, I was going, you know what book would be perfect to read? Habits of the Sea. Which made me realize I liked it more than I thought. So I give it a 3.75 overall. And I would put it under liked it a lot, would recommend. I think if you like the idea of a coastal gothic, something really atmospheric and like gloomy and bleak, and you don't mind a sudden kind of like narrative shift near the end, you would like the story a lot. It was really interesting to me, and I did order a copy for myself because it's so pretty. Like, this is, let me zoom in. This is the prettiest book cover I have seen in a minute. Like, it's so gorgeous. And then if you buy the copy that they have right now, like the first edition, there's inside cover art that depicts like the whole house that on the island, on like the drifting island. But yeah, I want to buy it because I want to reread it. I want to reread it the next time it's rainy with like a cup of tea, you know? Okay, next is Too Deep to Drown by Stacey R. Ward. This was also an ARC. There's a good amount of ARCs here, don't worry. A lot of these I read from like the library or bought myself. But anyways, I would put this under I liked it, but probably wouldn't reread it. This is a YA novel about a girl who was emancipated, and she gets a job working on a submarine or a boat. Listen, I'm pretty sure it's a sub. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to move it too much. I liked it. I think it's a really good, like, kind of coming of age story. And then you can feel the YA aspect in the way it also tries to teach you about, like, ocean conservation and, like, the state of our planet right now. I liked that. And I think it would be a really interesting book to have, like, students read. But I don't think I'd reread it personally. I think reading it once was fine. That being said, if I did reread it, I could see myself gleaning more from it and like picking up more information. I just don't personally have the desire to reread it again. You know what I mean? Okay, next is When the Night Comes Knocking by Catherine Daniel. Also an ARC, not out yet. I think it comes out in like September, October. This is an Appalachian horror. I liked it. I thought it was really fun. I'd put it under like but would not reread, because to me this is a horror that kind of relies on maybe like jump scare and like the unknown, but reading it twice basically wouldn't be as scary personally. Like, I wouldn't really feel as much. I'd just kind of be reading it. And I don't think the storytelling was so amazing that I'd want to read it twice. I think it was Really fun to read once. Next is Madeline McKnight Signs Off. This one's about a woman who is dying. That's why it says signs off. And she hires the daughter of an estranged friend to help take care of her in her last months. Very somber. I liked it. I don't think I'd reread this one either. Because to me, there's this point where suddenly they go from being kind of estranged, like the daughter of the estranged friend, and then Madeline. The daughter's name is Bree. There's this point where Bree and Madeline go from kind of being standoffish to just being very close, and I'm just wondering, I feel as though you guys skipped a couple chapters. Like, I don't know where this bond formed. I'm a little confused. But I think the story after that also becomes a lot better, because at first it's kind of just like watching this constant tension and arguing, and I just didn't care about that as much. But I'm not mad I read it. I liked it. I just wouldn't touch it again. There's also this subplot about like this other lady. Listen, guys, I'm sorry. Like, that's how irrelevant the subplot was to me personally, that I just don't remember who it's about. I'm like, okay. Like, I got so annoyed every time it was brought up. I was like, I don't care. Okay, next is Crazy Spooky Love by Josie Silver. This is the book that reminded me that smut can be in a book you don't anticipate it to be in, because I picked up this book. Here, let me show you the cover. I picked up this book thinking that I was going to be reading about a girl who can see ghosts, solving mysteries, dealing with a love triangle. Why would there be smut in this? I was so confused. I'm thinking I'm getting some kind of Nancy Drew book. And what I will say is, you know what? If she hones her craft a little bit, look at me. I'm not a critic, okay? But I think if this book was a little better, or if it was just mystery focused, this would have been like an adult kind of Nancy Drew situation, like the way the mystery progressed and the way she solved it. It was so fun. It was so interesting. The problem is that there's so much awful romance in this book. And I say awful because I don't like the male lead. It's supposed to be a love triangle. It's not. And that's not a spoiler, because you're going to figure that out so fast. It's not a love triangle. I'm not trying to rant about this book, but listen, it's not a love triangle, and the male lead is just not that likable. And then you can tell the book was written in 2016. They rebranded it, or like repurposed it with this new cover. It used to be called The Ghost of Scarsborough Castle, I believe. And you know what? If I picked up a book with that title, I think I would have liked this more, because it's called Crazy Spooky Love. I'm thinking it's going to be a romance, but the romance is the worst part of this entire book. It's like this man who you're describing as a potty-mouthed Mr. Darcy. First of all, how dare you? This is not Mr. Darcy. It's not even a potty-mouthed one. This is just an awful, a-hole kind of guy. And then I have to keep sitting through the romance, and then I have to keep getting reminded that this was written in 2016. There's this one scene, it's the smut scene, and the way they phrased it, it was like, oh, he kissed me like he'd die for me. I wrapped my legs around him like he was the Haribo King, as in Haribo Gummy Bear, because she spent the entire chapter kind of thinking about gummy bears. And I just remember I read that part and I went, what on earth? I should have DNF'd it right there. I don't regret reading it, because like I said, I do think the way the mystery kind of wrapped up, and that whole aspect of crime solving, Scooby-Doo ragtag, because she has two accomplices, we'll say, to help her solve the mystery. I liked it, but not for me. That being said, because it ended on a cliffhanger and I don't like that, I do have the second book on my Kobo. So I will be reading it eventually, maybe when I'm in a slump, because what I will say, and also the reason why it's not I regret ever reading it, is because it got me out of a reading slump that I, who have never known men, put me in. Like that existential slump I was just suddenly in. Okay, Mindset by Carol Dweck. This is really quick and easy. It was fine. You only need to read the first 3 chapters and the last chapter. I read the whole book, but honestly, after the 3rd chapter, chapters, 4 through 7 or something, or 4 through 9, I don't remember how many chapters there are in this book, are just the same thing with different applications. Honestly, even if you only read the first 2 chapters, I think you'd be better off, because just knowing about the different kind of mindsets was really interesting, and it did actually change how I look at problems, I will say. So that's why I think it was fine. I just think it was a little too long, as are most nonfiction books, or self-help specifically. A lot of self-help is a little longer than it ever needs to be. Death was not on the guest list. I would give this one, I'll put it under it was fine. This is like a Great Gatsby aesthetic murder mystery. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think the main characters, the 2 narrators that we have to kind of follow, they're just not that likable. And I don't mind an unlikable narrator, but when it comes to mystery, I kind of need to like the people who are doing the crime. I've noticed that if I don't like the people who are narrating a mystery, I will not enjoy the story. It's just not something that I will end up enjoying. And I don't know. I think as far as mysteries go too, it was a little flimsy sometimes, the way things were handled. It makes sense by the end, but I was still like, whatever. Next is I Who Have Never Known Men. For me, I would put this on up here. I liked it a lot. I would definitely recommend it. I think at this point, most people should know which book that is, 40 women underground. They find their way above ground. And it turns out maybe being underground was actually a bit of a mercy. I like the themes this book explores. This is very much, I don't know if I call it literary fiction, but it kind of is. I just think it's a very bleak dystopian novel, and the kind of questions that it imposes and makes you think about are what I really liked about this book. I would not pick this up thinking it's going to be feminist literature. I don't know why it's called feminist literature. That's not my place to speak. It's just like, I don't know what definition of feminism they're using in this case. I don't know where you find that in this book, besides there not really being many men in here. But I think the whole concept of like, what is like humanity, and like what is absurd when this is just like your reality, and what do relationships look like when you have no men around you. I liked that aspect of it, and I would totally recommend it to anyone who's like, I want like a dystopian, or I want something that's going to put me in like a bit of an existential slump. I would recommend that book to them. I would also recommend A Short Stay in Hell. It'll definitely put you in an existential slump. I had to like walk around the room for a while after that one. Okay, next is The Mad Wife by Megan Church. I liked this book. I wouldn't reread it. It was just a little too sad for me, reading about housewives and them having to get like tranks and lobotomies. That was already depressing enough. I will say the atmosphere was well done. I felt suffocated reading this, okay? Just reading all the expectations of women. I was so suffocated because the main character was also very suffocated by these expectations, so I got it. But there's a twist, like a real twist, and you're like, oh my goodness. And suddenly the story is just so depressing. And then suddenly the husband does something that I think is so awful. But ultimately, it's a woman in the 50s, and she just has to deal with it. So it made me very angry, but I got it. Like, I kind of understood why it had to go that way. But I would not reread it. I do not like rereading books that make me this angry. I feel like that would be like watching Peach Girl. Speaking of Peach Girl, side note, if you like Peach Girl and you like that level of drama, you absolutely will like Death of the Author. That's one of the reasons I didn't like this book. It was so frustrating. It was like I was reading something that was just as frustrating as watching the Peach Girl anime. Okay? Like, it was too much. The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. It was fine. I read it. I think the way they solved the case was interesting. But I didn't like anybody in this book. They were all so annoying. Not a single person in this book is likable. So I didn't even I tried to read the second book, or I tried to listen to the second audiobook because I listened to the first audiobook. I had to stop. I put it on pause. I was like, I'm not in the mood for it right now. And I never picked it back up. I don't think I even planned to. I think the first book was just enough. Dominion by Addie E. Kitchens. This goes under genuinely mixed feelings. I DNF'd this book for like a week, and then I was like, you know what? Let me try again, because I realized the reason I was not enjoying it is because it was kind of poking holes at every single thing about religion that genuinely irritates me. Like, it was poking holes at all the things I don't like about church as an institution. But then I was like, okay, well, let me like understand that that's the point of this book, and like focus more on the story as well. But it's like everyone in this book aggravated me. This book was full of irritating people. Everyone's just so awful. And I don't even know how to... there's no way for me to talk about this story in a way that makes it sound good, but I understand why someone might like it. But I didn't, ultimately. I don't think I liked it, but I didn't hate it. But I didn't enjoy it either, And I think one of my issues was that this story spent a lot of time circling around a lot of ideas without ever landing on any of them. And that irritated me. Like, it would kind of touch upon a subject, and then it would never really get addressed again. And you're left sitting here like, well, what about this? What about that? And I was so annoyed. I would read another book by her, but just not about this kind of topic. Okay, next is Celestial Lights by Cecile Pinn. I think this was my first 5-star of the year. Like, I adored this book. It was so good. I picked it up. I got an ARC. Okay, I got this as an ARC. And then I actually ended up buying my own copy. So I have my own hard copy now that's sitting on my bookshelf. I thought this was going to be a science fiction book. This is a literary fiction book with like a sci-fi background, you know, like. And next is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. For me, this was fine. To put it really succinctly, this book is 60% vibes, 30% cats, 10% plot. If you like that, you will like this. I wasn't mad at it, but I didn't care for it either. Like, I debated buying a cover, like buying a copy just because the cover is really cute. And then I thought about it and I was like, I will never read this again. Like, not really. There's nothing about it that makes me want to reread it. It was just okay. But I think it's fun in its own way. I will say, one complaint that I had, and I noticed someone else brought up, you cannot tell that this book is set in like the 20s, I think. It reads as though it's set in like modern day time. I thought this book was set in like maybe the 60s even. And then I saw a wagon and I went, maybe the 1800s? I never would have, actually, I don't even know when this book was set. Maybe it was the 1800s. You can't tell when this book is set, and it's supposed to be set in like a specific time period, but like there's nothing done for that, which is why I say it's 60% vibes. Like, the vibes of the story is doing all the carrying. There's nothing really going on. This is The Caretaker by Marcus Clearer. I got this as an ARC. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'd reread it, which is why I'm going to put it here. Like, I didn't even want to buy my own copy. I considered it when I saw it for Aardvark, but then I ultimately just went, no. Like, I didn't care enough to, I was like, I'll pick something else. Because the thing about this book, it does a really good job at like building atmosphere. It's very eerie, very unsettling. A lot of the imagery is, you know, also very unsettling and adds to that atmosphere. Was that thunder? But it's also the kind of book where I feel as though if you've read it once, that's enough. Like, I'm not really going to be like scared or unnerved again because I know exactly what's going to happen. So I don't see a need to read it again, which is interesting because there are some horror books where perhaps that feeling should apply, but it doesn't. But this isn't that case. Like, for me, I think if you read it once, you kind of get the idea of everything. I could see wanting to reread it, but I personally just didn't. So that's why it goes right there. Next is Judge Stone by Viola Davis and James Patterson. I don't know where I'd put this because this is one of the books that made me go, do I dislike court dramas? Maybe. I'm trying to figure that out because for me, a lot of this book was kind of boring. A lot of this book I felt took way too long to do anything. And then once we got to the case, it was fast, but I was interested, but I wasn't like riveted. And then I was also looking stuff up like, oh, does this really happen in a court? Does this really happen? Blah, blah, blah. So I got to learn some new stuff, but I don't think I was obsessed with the story. I think you could like it. I think I liked it, actually. I enjoyed it. I did the audiobook. It was fun. It was a good time. But I would never reread the story. Like, I genuinely wouldn't. So that's why it's going to go right there. Next is Ring Shout. I loved this book. It's going to go right up here. This was also one of my 5 stars. I think the only books I gave 5 stars were this, and Ring Shout. The rest of these are 4.5. But I love this book. It's a horror, and it's also kind of like a historical fiction. I just think the imagery was so good. It's very visceral, and just kind of like the messaging of it all and the way the story is woven. I liked it. It was so short, but I would totally read it again. And I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's really hard to explain why I like certain horror books versus others. It's like a harder genre to kind of explain. But I think just the storytelling aspects, and then maybe like the horror imagery and the way it kind of like approached horror as a whole, I really liked. Next is The Cozy Nook Bookshop. I would put this, I liked it, but I probably wouldn't reread it. There is smut in this book, by the way, in case you're curious. This was also an ARC. I think it was cute. I think the problems it gave the two people, were like the two main characters, they were real. A little silly to the point that the third act conflict felt very contrived, but I enjoyed the story. There's 3 like spicy scenes, and they're very detailed. Like if it's in the chapter, it's the whole chapter, and it'll be like 12 pages. But I liked the story. I liked the way they liked each other. I liked that it was instant love. I don't hate instant love at all, honestly, which is funny because part of one of the tropes is the guy being like, I don't believe in fate. and liking someone because of fate. And it's like, okay, but you fell in love with her instantly. So what's going on? But it was really cute. I think it reads like a really cute Hallmark movie, okay? Or a Lifetime. No, I think Lifetime's sadder. Sleepwalk by Charles Johnston. I think I'd put this under I liked it a lot. I would recommend. This is like his first book. He used to do like children's stuff, I think, is what his thing on Goodreads said. I really liked it. It read like a Goosebumps book. The whole point is this guy was set on fire at his job, like on accident. He caught fire, and now he's coming back to work after almost burning alive, and people are dying, and he thinks he might be related to it, and he might be doing it in his sleep. Like, he might be killing people in his sleep. But I thought it was really interesting. The ending was very Goosebumps, honestly. So I think if you like the idea of reading a Goosebumps book, this is worth it. If you don't, then maybe not, but I really liked it. And it's super short. It's like 100 pages. Okay, next is The Final Act of Juliet Willoughby. I would put this one under, it was fine. I'll put it under, I liked it, but probably wouldn't reread it. I think the whole concept of like, art that was approaching this book through two art students, that was really interesting. I enjoyed that aspect. I think reading about Juliet Willoughby and her life, that was interesting. But the two art students, was it Patrick and Caroline? I've read this so long ago. I believe Patrick and Caroline. I didn't care about them, and it was really annoying. I don't want to read about these kids at an art school in Cambridge. Was it Cambridge? I didn't care. And I didn't care if they ended up together. I didn't care if they broke up. I just didn't care about any of that. So it was like, I just wish this story was more focused on maybe like the art scene and then like Juliet Willoughby's life. Like that would have been a really interesting story. And it was, like the bits we got, it was so interesting. And there is a twist, but I can't spoil it. You'll probably be able to figure it out though. Next is The Dating Game by Ali Zetterberg. This was an arc. I regret ever reading this book. I completely regret it. So this is about a girl whose mom dies and she decides, well, I need a friend and I need a boyfriend. So let me try and find one and let me treat it like a board game. And that does sound really interesting, right? She's like, and if they mess up, 3 strikes and you're out. But it's like a thriller. So it's like, you're out. What does that mean? Probably nothing good. But it's like, I don't know. This book was so absurd. After a while, I couldn't keep suspending my disbelief that somebody could do this and keep getting away with it. And then the way the romance worked, I was like, you are both, like, everyone sucks here. I was so irritated. And I honestly, I didn't even want to keep reading it, but I was like, it's an arc. If it wasn't, I would have DNF'd this book. Like, that's actually the only reason. And this is the book that made me get a lot more selective about, like, only picking books that I think I might actually like, which I was doing before, but I was being a lot more, like, laissez-faire about it. Like, oh, okay, yeah, let me just pick whatever. After this, it's like, no. Let me check a couple other things because I didn't like this at all. Next is Mom Brain by, what is this? Nicole Hackett. This was also an arc. It was fine. It's like partially literary fiction, partially a thriller. I didn't like the thriller aspect, and I don't think the literary fiction was super well done. Maybe because I'm not a mom. I will acknowledge that. Like, maybe I just can't connect with it because I'm not a mom. I don't know. But I wasn't super moved by the story. I just thought it was fine. I think the plot was a little weird. Like, the way it moved through things, I just kind of wondered, how does this work? Like, if you did this thing, how does your job just let you be forgiven with this one thing, And also, how do you commit this kind of potential crime and then everything's okay? There's just a lot of questions this book raises that don't really get answered, and that to find the answer requires a little bit too much disbelief suspension from me for a book that's not meant to be like a horror or a fantasy or a sci-fi. Although I will argue sci-fi doesn't require disbelief suspension. Sci-fi is predictive. Okay, next was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I would put this under, I liked it a lot, would recommend. I think this is a really fun, hard sci-fi. Ultimately just like the whole concept of saving humanity, finding something to die for, and then the whole thing about like finding a friend through this potential long-term loneliness. I really liked it. I saw someone say the writing is really juvenile. I don't disagree with that, but I don't know if you would pick this up expecting like really masterful writing. Like, you're picking this up to read like a feel-good sci-fi about like hope. And I think it delivers on that just fine. I will say also, like, the science, if you don't really get it, you'll be okay. My sister skipped through like most of it and still understood the plot. I read all of it. There's some things I don't get. I still could not tell you what on earth a neutrinos is, but it never impedes your understanding of the story. Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I read this after reading a really awful train book. I'm sure you can see it. We'll get to it later. But yeah, this was fine. For me, it was just fine. I know some people like would probably rank it higher, but I don't think it was like amazing. I think it was like a little boring, but still pretty interesting. I will read the rest of her stuff, but this particular book I just didn't really care for. I thought maybe it was because I did the audiobook, so I actually did go and read it after as well. I think it was just pretty regular as far as like stories and mysteries go. Maybe a little too formulaic. There's nothing wrong with the story being that way, but for this one, I don't know if I liked the formula in particular. Next is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This book made me cry. So I think this is also 5 stars. Sorry, this is the 4th 5-star I've given all year, or it might have been the 3rd, whatever. But I enjoyed this book so much. I think Toni Morrison in her foreword says that she thinks this book is a bit of a failure because a lot of people were touched but not moved. Like, she's not saying this is the worst book I've ever written. She's just saying what she set out to do wasn't fully accomplished because not everyone like fully gets it. I was moved. I genuinely cried by the end of this. I cried writing the review. If I think a little too long about this book, I cry. And whenever people ask me, like, oh, what Toni Morrison book should I start with? I mean, I can't answer that because I've only read this one so far, but I think this would probably be a really good place to start because it's her first one. And I think the writing and the way it like approaches certain themes of like beauty and beauty standards and, like how that can all weigh down on you. It was done so well, and it was incredibly touching and incredibly moving, and I adored it so much. Okay, next is How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price. Honestly, I'd put it right here because while it was fine, the thing about this one is this was a self-help book that was exactly as long as it needed to be. It had like maybe 50 pages just showing you some of the benefits of being less attached to your phone. And then it's like a 30-day plan of what you're going to do for the next 30 days. And it breaks it down day by day of how you're going to be less attached to your phone. And I loved that. It was exactly as long as it needed to be. And that's hard to say for a lot of self-help books, honestly. Okay, next is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, whatever. For me, this wasn't for me. I didn't care for it. I don't know if I would say the writing was bad, but it was insufferable for sure. I didn't like the main character. I didn't like Alicia Berenstain. Was that her name? I didn't like her. I didn't like anything about this book. And then once the twist happens, I liked it even less. I don't regret ever reading it because you know what? I think it was fine. It wasn't awful to the point that I'd regret it, but it was like, I don't know, to say I enjoyed it would be a stretch. It just wasn't for me. Okay, next we have The Austen Affair by Madeline Bell. My bad, I almost said Price. I really like this story. I would totally recommend it. This is... Let me zoom in. You can see the Pride and Prejudice influence in this story. You can see probably all of the other stuff as well, but I haven't read any other Jane Austen works. I've only ever read Pride and Prejudice. I want to read through her other stuff and come back to this book and see how that goes. But for now, like having just only read Pride and Prejudice, I saw it in this book and I really liked it. And I think you would appreciate this story for like the love letter to Jane Austen that it is. There is a smut scene in here, and I do think the third act conflict, it's not super contrived. It makes sense, but it's like, dang. It was a little harsh. I was like, geez, I don't know how you come back from that one. But also, it's kind of a forced proximity story, so they don't really have a choice but to come back from it. Okay, next is Grief Eater. This is an arc, probably the last arc I have in here to talk about. Yeah, the last one. I really liked this one. Actually, I put it under I really liked it, I think, and would recommend. I think it's a very short novella about a girl who becomes a zombie and, in a final mission kind of trope, just before she can fully let go of her humanity, she sets off to get answers to a question. And I think it was very emotional. Not very emotional, but it was pretty emotional, kind of touching. And that final scene where she lets everything go, I loved it. I liked the way it was written and I thought it was super interesting. Next is Strange Houses. This is Ketsu's first book. I read Strange Pictures first. Strange Houses, I didn't like as much. I think it was just fine. It was a little too macabre for me, and this one required a lot more disbelief suspension than I was okay with while still liking a book. There were just a lot of times where I was like, sure, oh, it's gonna rain soon. Sorry. There were a lot of moments where I was like, sure, okay, whatever. And I just think, I don't know. Also, the format of this book was, it was written like a script. So it's like character, line, like, line, character, line. Like that was how it was written. And that takes me out of the reading sometimes. Okay, next is How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates by, Shaylee Thompson. Right here. I liked it a lot, would recommend. This is a rom-com slasher. I think it handled both genres really well. It was super entertaining. And I think the romance aspect was really sensible. Like there was no, oh, I love you, I die for you. It was a little lusty, but what I will say is I think in a situation like this, basically they go on a speed dating, the main character and her friend, they go to like a speed dating event. And at the end of like the 10th date, one of the guys has his throat, So they're in this situation where they're trapped in a building with a slasher. I don't really think love is going to form. I think, emotions are high, so things will be a little more lusty. So I actually understood it and I appreciated it, I guess. Okay, next is Dear Debbie by Frida McFadden. Not for me. I don't regret reading it. Honestly, I read it all in one sitting. It's really easy to get sucked into the book. It was really interesting, and I think those little articles are just like, Dear Debbie, my husband doesn't like my cooking. What should I do? Lock him in the room and force him to eat your cooking, And if he doesn't leave, no food or water for him. Like, I think that's really funny, and I think it was very unhinged. I like that, but I think as far as a book goes, like, I don't think it was actually that great. Like, I don't know if I could say, oh, I really like this book. I was like, I was entertained at times, and that's just kind of my opinion on it. Like, it's not great. It wasn't awful, but if you ask me, like, if it's bad, I might be like, just a little. Time Management Ninja, can't see who that's by. I would put under It Was Fine. Granted, this one was also exactly as long as it should have been, but it's just like a normal book. It's not inventing the wheel. It's just kind of like reminding you of little time management tips that you should consider. And I do like them. I like a lot of them. I still implement some of them. So it's pretty helpful, but it just wasn't like, I think it's a book you kind of keep, just like flip through whenever you need it. Not a book you really need to sit down and like read. I don't want to end on a bad note, so we'll do this one. What is it? 640 to Montreal by Ava Jerzik. This was the worst book I've read all year. It was awful. It reads like a fever dream. The characters are very cartoonish. The plot twist and the whodunit of it all was so awful. If you think about it for like 3 seconds, it falls apart. It just wasn't a good book. I didn't enjoy it, and I actually wish I'd never read it. I should have stopped reading it, but it was like, I'm like 60% in. I haven't liked the last 60%, but I might as well just finish it, just so when I type out this review, I'm justified in having a fully informed opinion. And then I lied about being my last arc, because the last one is She Walks at Night by Seishi Yokomizo, I believe. I had so much fun with this book, actually. I think I gave it a 4.5. This is like a crime mystery. It was so fun. I had so much fun like trying to piece everything together, and his mysteries are meant to be like solvable. So when I'm like reading it, I'm like, what if it was this? What if it was that? And I'm putting some things together, but not everything. And I just really liked it. This is the 8th book in the series, so it's not the first one or anything, or it might be the 9th, but that doesn't matter. Like, I was never lost because it was the 8th book. I will say, if anything, the first maybe like 10 or so pages, just boring history, but that's rude. It's like Japanese history, but like, I just didn't want to read about it. But it's fine. If you can get through that, the story gets really interesting once you get to like the whole part where like some guy's head is found severed. I liked everything about it. I enjoyed the entire story, and just like by the time I got to the end, I was like, yeah, there is a twist in here that I did not, like, I genuinely did not anticipate that twist. And when it happened, I was like, whoa, like, that is the way that twist should be done. I would say it's a bit, like, it handles the twist much better than one of the other books on this list, but I don't want to give away what trope it is, because then it'll spoil the whole thing. But, if you like crime mystery, this was a really good read. Okay, so that was it. That was a long time, guys. Like, I'm so thirsty. My throat is so dry. So I'm going to make lunch. I hope you liked it. If you want me to talk about any of those books a little more in depth, let me know. Feel free. My next video will probably be like my June book review, just kind of like a review of the 11 books I read. But thanks for watching, and see you next time.